The town that sleeps before 10 p.m. I live in a town where everyone's in bed by 10 p.m., without exception. It's not just a habit, it's a rule, almost like an unspoken law. By the time the clock hits 10, doors are locked, lights are out, and people are tucked in like their lives depend on it. Even the stray dogs, who usually roam and bark, seem to disappear, leaving the streets eerily quiet. As a kid, I couldn't wrap my head around it. I'd ask my mom and dad, why does everyone go to bed so early? Their answer was always the same, it's just the way it's always been. That explanation never made sense to me. What kind of tradition was this? Why did everyone treat bedtime like it was sacred? The older I got, the more questions I had. The silence of our nights wasn't peaceful, it was suffocating. And there was something even stranger, no one ever stirred after 10 p.m. Not for water, not for the bathroom, nothing. Once people fell asleep, it was as if the entire town entered a deep, dreamless void until sunrise. I remember overhearing a hushed conversation at a neighbor's barbecue when I was 10. He didn't follow the rule, one man whispered, his voice shaking. Never woke up again. The others noticed me eavesdropping and quickly changed the subject. But I'd already heard enough to light a fire of curiosity inside me. What rule? And what really happened after 10 p.m.? One night, I decided I'd find out for myself. That evening went just like every other. We ate dinner at 7, watched TV until 9, and by 9:30, my parents were in their room, ready for bed. I followed suit, climbing under my blanket and closing my eyes. But I wasn't planning to sleep. I stayed completely still, waiting, listening. At exactly 10 p.m., the entire house fell silent. It wasn't just quiet, it was the kind of silence that feels alive, like it's watching you. I counted the seconds, my heart racing as the minutes dragged by. After what felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than 30 minutes, I slowly opened my eyes. The room was pitch dark. My breath sounded unnaturally loud in the stillness. I sat up, every tiny movement feeling like a thunderclap in the quiet. With shaking hands, I pushed off the blanket and tiptoed toward my bedroom door. I cracked it open. The hallway was empty, bathed in faint moonlight spilling through a window. My parents' room was just a few steps away. I needed to see them, to make sure they were okay. Their door creaked as I opened it. Inside, I saw them both lying on their bed, faces serene, breathing steady. They looked so peaceful that for a moment, I wondered if I was being ridiculous. Maybe all this curiosity was just my imagination running wild. But as I turned to leave, I felt it. It wasn't something I saw or heard, it was something I felt. A weight in the air, thick and cold, wrapping around me like an invisible hand. The hairs on my arms stood on end, and a chill crawled down my spine. Then came the voice. "Why are you awake?" I froze. My mouth went dry, and my legs felt like they were cemented to the floor. For a brief, hopeful moment, I thought, it's Mom. She must have woken up. But then I looked back toward their bed. The door was still open, and I could see them lying there, completely still. Asleep. My heart pounded as the voice came again, louder, sharper. "You're supposed to be sleeping. Why aren't you asleep?" It was closer now. Too close. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight as I turned toward the hallway, and that's when I saw it. It wasn't my mother. Not my father. Not anything human. The figure stood at the end of the hallway, impossibly tall and emaciated, its skin a sickly gray stretched thin over its bones. The joints of its limbs bent at grotesque angles, as though it had been folded and unfolded too many times. Its head tilted unnaturally, and where a face should have been, there was nothing, just a void, a swirling blackness that seemed to pull at the edges of reality itself. Its voice came, hollow and accusing, slicing through the silence like a blade. "It's your fault. You should have stayed asleep." The words hit me like a physical blow. Panic erupted in my chest, and I bolted. My legs felt like they were moving through water, heavy and sluggish, but somehow I forced myself to run. I didn't stop until I reached my room, slamming the door shut behind me. The pounding started immediately. It wasn't knocking, it was something else entirely. Each strike rattled the walls, the vibrations cutting through my bones. The sound wasn't just in my ears, it was in my head, my chest, my very being. I pressed my back against the door, tears streaming down my face, my breathing shallow and ragged. Then, as suddenly as it began, the pounding stopped. The silence was worse. For what felt like an eternity, I stayed there, frozen. My body trembled as I strained to hear anything, any sign that it was still there. But there was nothing. Maybe it was gone. Maybe I was safe. I turned the doorknob slowly, my hand shaking. The door creaked as I opened it a crack, then wider. The hallway was empty. But the air was different. Heavy. Suffocating. The world outside my room felt wrong. The walls were warped, like they'd been melted and reshaped. The colors were muted, drained of life, as though someone had turned the saturation down on reality. The faint hum of the clock in the hallway had vanished. I looked at it, and my stomach twisted. The hands weren't moving. It was still 10 p.m. And it would always be 10 p.m. I stumbled back into my room, my mind reeling. Something was wrong with my body, I felt it before I saw it. My limbs felt longer, heavier, alien. I caught a glimpse of myself in the reflection of my bedroom window. My heart stopped. I was taller. My frame gaunt, my skin pale and stretched unnaturally tight. But it was my face, or the absence of it, that made my stomach churn. My eyes, nose, and mouth were gone, replaced by a swirling, infinite void. The realization hit me like a thunderclap. I wasn't in my house anymore. I wasn't even in my world. The town was empty now. The houses stood hollow and abandoned, the streets lined with shadows that seemed to watch me. No parents. No neighbors. No life. Just me. And the silence. Days passed, or maybe years. Time didn't exist here. My memories began to fade, slipping away like water through my fingers. I could no longer remember the sound of my mother's laugh or the warmth of the sun on my face. But the anger grew. At first, it was small, a flicker. Then it was all I could feel, consuming me like a fire. I was angry at myself for staying awake. At the town for its cursed rules. At the universe for abandoning me here. And then, one night, I saw it. A boy. He was small and trembling, his wide eyes darting around as he crept down the hallway. He stopped at the door to his parents' room, peeking inside. I felt something stir within me, something dark and primal. The sight of him filled me with fury. "Why are you awake?" The boy froze. His head turned toward me, his face pale with terror. I stepped closer, my movements slow and deliberate. The void where my face should have been swallowed the dim light around me. And then I saw it, the truth. The boy wasn't just a boy. He was me. I stared into his wide, terrified eyes and remembered everything. The curiosity. The fear. The moment I stayed awake. And now, I understood. I was no longer myself. I had become something else. Something meant to enforce the rule, to keep the others asleep, to make sure no one else ever broke the silence of 10 p.m. The boy screamed, and I reached for him, my voice echoing through the empty, endless night. You should have stayed asleep.